Hi, welcome back to Vondelpete. Hope you're all doing well. And something you might have noticed about my YouTube channel is that I don't really give much advice or many tips to other people. And I think part of that is that I'm very self-centered. And I feel that rather than give people tips and advice on, I don't know, like how to be an INFP or something, I'd much rather wallow and just talk about my failings as an INFP or otherwise. And so in today's video, I thought I would talk about my failings when it comes to socializing and being part of the community, because it's now 2 weeks, I think, since I've had any proper social interaction. I have texted people and I have said just that thanks when I was in a supermarket buying, groceries. But aside from that, I haven't actually had any one-on-one interaction, and I don't think that really counts unless you actually have a conversation with the person behind the counter, which I haven't. There is the woman who's like approaching 90 years old. She wears an old-fashioned, like Edwardian era white hat. She's got a posh British accent, but she's actually Australian. But back in those days, people with a lot of money actually had a posh British sounding accent, the cultivated Australian accent. Well, she lives in a retirement village on my street, and even during the pandemic years, she sometimes was the only person I spoke to. When I was in lockdown, living in this apartment. Even yesterday, we just waved across the road, and I once crossed the road to talk to her, and I remember thinking that she didn't really want that. She just wanted to wave. She probably would have spoken to me if I crossed the road to talk to her. But anyway, we waved. I did one wave and she waved back with a smile. And then I kept walking. And then I looked back at her and then she waved again, but she waved in an exaggerated way. I don't know if it was a way of saying, I think it was just nice. I think she was just being funny rather than mocking the way I waved. That would be very paranoid if I started getting all worked up at that old lady. But yeah, I think 2 weeks of being alone is quite a lot. Maybe it's not. Maybe there's a lot of people, like my dad's one of those people. He's an INFJ, Enneagram 5, I believe. And he's very much into self-preservation, and he loves talking in very dramatic language about how he does not need a single other human being and he can sleep happily at night as long as he's growing his beans or whatever. And it's an absolute lie. I remember once during the lockdown, I kept calling him because I was living alone, he was living alone, and then he just didn't eat for a few days, and I remember telling him I don't think that's good, and no, it's fine, gaslighting me, telling me that I'm crazy for thinking that people should eat, and of course he ended up being hospitalized. So this is the kind of neurotic dad I've got. Thank you, INFJs, for the most INFJs I don't think are like that, or are they? Anyway, I think I'm worse than my dad. My dad talks the talk when it comes to being completely isolated, but he's a liar. Like he does talk to people in shops. He does go out and converses with people, and he sends his letters off, and he has phone calls, and he does a lot more socializing than me. He just likes to make out that he's more isolated than me. But actually on that topic, I think INFJs and INFPs both romanticize being alone sometimes, and I don't think it's actually that good for them. They're feeler types, and by being feeler types, you end up being very humanistic. Is that a word? Whether or not you need a lot of time to recharge is kind of beside the point. If you cut off all human beings and just start focusing on things and routines, and it's not good obviously for anyone of any personality type, but it's like there's a bit of a trick that INFJs and INFPs play on themselves if they are the type that believes that they don't need a single human being to function. And that's why they end up being so depressed. They can be very awesome creatively because they've got all that time and they've got all that stuff going on in their heads. Obviously, I'm talking about they when really I'm talking about myself here. I'm just projecting. But I will say, when so obviously I did about 10 months here during lockdown, working from home years ago when I had a job. But it didn't feel that different to the way I am now. And it wasn't, I don't think it was good for me over the months as it got to 10 months and, you're not seeing hardly anybody. We were allowed a bubble here in Melbourne in Australia, a social bubble. So you're allowed to see one friend outside of a certain radius once a day, I think. I don't know. So my ISFJ friend Kevin became part of my bubble. So once a week, I got to hang out and see someone. Wow. But what I wanted to say was the INFJs in my office back at that time, there was a few different INFJ men and women, and they all kept coming into work. They made a fuss and got special consideration. Not all of them, but three of them did. And they all were coming into work and they were just enjoying socializing with the few people who were in the office. And they said, oh, the good people keep coming into the office and everyone else has to stay at home and lockdown, working from home. And I felt a bit jealous about that, but it was so weird. It was the introverts that really needed the social interaction and were suffering more from the working from home and the isolation. I remember we were discussing this, and it was pretty similar across the board. And once we were all forced to go back into work, I think around March 2021, we had to go into the office and do the same work, and a lot of people were attached to living to working from home. And obviously, I live a bit closer to the city than some of these people, so I very much sympathize with people wanting to work from home when they live further out or they've got families. So I'm not, I know that plays into it, but despite that, I still think that it was very interesting that some of the people who were very introverted were the most desperate to come into the office. At least these introverts I'm talking about all happen to be INFJs in particular, actually. But for me as well, it was just like I couldn't believe that I could bump into people in corridors and have little chats with them and then go back to my desk. I mean, one of the problems was you were allowed to chat to people on text from home, and a lot of people do feel more comfortable doing that. But not me. I much prefer in-person interactions, which again, if I was a proper INFP introvert, why would I be choosing one-on-one physical interactions with people over texting? One of the reasons I don't go and join social groups, why don't I become a Catholic and join the church? That's always in the back of my mind. But then I think about my whole childhood of church going and Sunday schools, and I was like, it was just horrible. Just ISTJ Sunday school teachers screaming at me, making me stand on one foot in the corner for being a bad person because we were doing a word search based on Bible verses and they kept talking about Jesus' shepherd rod or something. And I thought it was funny to say his fishing rod, and I treated it like a joke and I got screamed at. So I don't have very good memories of the Catholic Church. But my point is, I don't want to go out and I don't want to become a swing dancer. You know, that's something like a lonely ENTP will join swing dancing because they just keep getting kicked out of different social groups because they keep insulting people and they always go, what? And they get, kicked out of their social group and then they join swing dancing and then they've got a new social group. Great solution for an ENTP who's lonely. I'm not going to join Second Life because that's not a good road to go down. I think as everyone, I'm sure that everyone watching this video knows why you don't go down the Second Life road. When you moved to Japan in 2014, and then you isolate yourself in a Tokyo guest house and don't actually talk to anyone and just go on Second Life and go into clubs in Second Life and everyone ignores you. And then one day you're just so sick of Second Life that you go down to the bank to get a card so that you can register in your local ward of Itabashi in Tokyo, and then you go to when you're sitting in the bank, you make an INTP friend from London, and he's really cool, and then he starts inviting you out, and then you go clubbing with him and his Canadian friends, and then all of a sudden in clubs, people do talk to you, and girls like you, and then you get like an ISFP girlfriend in a real Tokyo club, but then you go back home, and then you're like, do I go back on Second Life and get ignored in this virtual club, or do I go to real clubs in Tokyo? It was very difficult to make that decision, which was better. But in good news, as usual, it's actually often I get rescued by, obviously I see my ISFJ friend once a week usually, except his daughter's been sick. Apart from them, I've got my INFJ friend and his ENFJ wife. Sometimes it's nice to see them, but not always. Although I probably should text the INFJ friend, because sometimes we go out for coffee and we do this long walk, and he feels really enchanted by the long walk. It means a lot to him, and by extension, it means a lot to me. It's very romantic, me and the INFJ guy. We get a coffee, and INFJs sometimes walk really slowly, and there's something I love about almost every INFJ I know. There were these two INFJ brothers I used to jam with in a goth band when I was in high school, but one of the INFJs became insane like totally. I mean, I'm not sure how he is now. I don't think his brother follows him on Facebook, but his younger brother, I ended up staying in contact with him. And a few years ago, we hadn't seen each other in 10 years and chatted, but he was such an INFJ that his way of like organizing to meet up with me, he wasn't just going to get a coffee with me or something like that. No, no, he books a recording studio here in Melbourne. He doesn't even live in Melbourne. He drove to my city, and I meet him at a recording studio, and then he goes and learns songs to jam that he knew from when I was young I liked. And we hung out together, and he's a man of few words, and he's really quiet. But there's this warmth that I got from him just as a person. I was just like, I really like this person. It was a wonderful, we spent 5 hours jamming, and that was nice. I haven't seen him since. See, if I was to get out of my shell, I could message him and say we should hang out sometime. But I never do it. I never reach out. You know, because INFPs are really bad at reaching out, I think, across the board. But I'm really bad even for an INFP. So often other INFPs break, and then they're the ones who message me. I've got a friend called Lionel, who's my oldest INFP friend, and I hadn't heard from him in 8 months. And I started thinking, I guess he hates me now. I guess that's all over. You know, my old INFP, and we've had falling outs in the past. We actually travelled to Japan together and had this big fight at 1 in the morning in Takamatsu, and we had a big fight years ago, and we've seen each other since, but it was like it kind of damaged the friendship, and I was worried that we weren't talking anymore. But then he just messaged me out of the blue from Taiwan. He's just floating around Asia by himself, having adventures, getting locked out of hostels. I think he's in Korea right now, unless he's come back to Melbourne. And he actually said to me, we should hang out when we get back. And I was like, I feel so happy. Like I thought I'd lost him as a friend. Not all INFP friends are good friends, actually. There's a few INFPs I met last year when I was studying to be a library technician. And there was one INFP, 41 years old, from Taiwan, this guy, living in Melbourne, great artist. And I like his quirkiness. I like the fact that he's a proper 4-wing-5 INFP, artistic, tortured artist. And it actually did create a sense of comfort when I'd hang out with him. Very interesting person. And he told me he was very lonely, and he lamented a lot of things in life. He very much, he played the victim on almost everything. And like some of the things, like it's fair, like he is a victim. And in other ways, he's just coming up with ways to be more of a victim. I think it's because when you are genuinely a victim in life, sometimes, unfortunately, you can latch on to the idea of victimhood. It can happen. I know it's a bit of a, I don't know, controversial thing to say, but I think there's a lot of validity in it. And I know it from my own experience of feeling like a victim. You can get really attached to being a victim, and you find new ways to be a victim, even if you genuinely were traumatized or you genuinely were abused by someone. Unfortunately, that can get normalized, I think. Like I'm not a therapist. I don't have any background in what I'm talking about. But by the time this guy, like he had an art exhibition, everyone applauded him, people supported him, and then he was so angry. He said that being called an artist, he said, is like a hate word. He said it's worse than any racial insult, and he was yelling, and the fact that he was just yelling, I don't like being around someone who's just yelling all the time. So I went drinking with this guy and having coffees endlessly last year, and sometimes it was good. Like he was a pretty bizarre person. He was constantly not getting any of his assignments in, and he was, and the yelling, I put up with the yelling when he was going on his, you know, even if he was yelling at me saying, you could have any woman you want, Peter, because you are white. And I was like, yep, I guess so. And I didn't mind that. I didn't mind him yelling and complaining about everything like that. And I didn't even mind when he started like complaining about women only like stupid men like me. And well, he only said that once, to be fair. But you know, and the thing I didn't like about him was, I think number one, I didn't like him getting so upset and yelling about everything all the time. You can't just have someone yelling about everything going wrong in their life all the time, even when it's, I guess his life was good and bad, like a lot of people's, but oh man. Oh man. Anyway, I had to stop hanging out with him because he was, even once we graduated, he just kept turning up in my suburb all the time, and then he kept going to class even though there was no classes anymore. So that creeped me out a bit. And I think he's just lonely and he wants to hang out with me. But after everything last year, I was like, I think I am better off being alone for my own sanity. I was just, I was coming home after hanging out with him sometimes, and I was just all shaken up, and I couldn't concentrate and watch movies. I was preoccupied, and I think that's a normal reaction if someone's. I don't know if he meant to be so angry all the time, but he was just oozing with anger and hatred, and I was soaking it all up, and unfortunately that impacts you. What was this video about again? Let me know in the comments what this video is about. I forget, but I might actually upload this video. What do you reckon? Like, who cares anymore? Who cares? Hang on, what was this video about? This video was about loneliness, right? So yeah, loneliness. Yeah, what I wanted to say, I guess, leave me a note in the comments your any thoughts you've got at all, any ideas you've got about how much alone time is good or bad. But yeah, I'm gonna catch up with my INFP friend David on Monday, and I actually suggested it to him. Can you believe that I actually said to someone we should hang out? Do you know how rare that is that I humble myself to that degree? I always wait for the other person to initiate. That's probably the biggest part of the problem. There are people who I want to see and I just don't message them because I'm like, oh no. I always think like, imagine getting a message from Peter wanting to hang out. And I was like, oh, I don't want to, I got too much fear of the rejection, I think. It's like, I think every time I imagine reaching out to someone, I envision like this long message coming back about every reason why they don't like me. But yeah, it's good. We're going to hang out and I'll probably get a sandwich or something with him. It'll be good for my mental health, I think. And even in terms of creativity, like it's good to be alone a lot to be creative. But I have noticed, like I can remember even 2010 when I lost a job and then I started isolating myself from friends. I started getting dizzy all the time, and I wasn't able to properly be creative either because I think you need some social interaction to get some energy at all and motivation. I think just seeing anybody, I usually find the next day I can work on something much harder. I can create a song, or I can yeah, it's good. And even working, right? As I said, I don't want to work 5 days a week in the future if I can, but there are very important benefits if you're in a workplace that's functional and nice. For some reason, Reddish Raven has just turned up on my TV. That's embarrassing. I think the screensaver must have gone. Anyway, let me know any thoughts you've got in the comments, and I'll see you next time.